Chapter 4, The Flight. Peter told Wendy that the way to Neverland was second to the right and straight on till morning. It wasn't quite that easy. The children followed Peter in his flight, but Peter seemed only to follow his nose and not a map. But they didn't mind. Flying was such fun it made no difference if they were going somewhere or not. They circled in the air like soaring birds, swooping around church spires and racing with the clouds. They lost all track of time, and soon they were over the sea. When they were hungry, Peter would snatch a bit of food from a passing bird for them. When they were sleepy, they would fall straight toward the sea, only to be saved at the last minute by Peter, who treated the whole thing as a game. He loved to show off by sleeping on his back or by teasing sharks in the water below. "Tell him to stop showing off," John said jealously. "We must be nice to him," Wendy answered. "If he left us, where would we be?" "We could go home," Michael said. Wendy flew alongside her little brother. "But we don't know the way," she said. "We must be polite to him." Peter had flown off for a moment, and the children felt quite lonely. They were sure he had forgotten them. "He forgets things he did only a few moments ago," Wendy said. "He might forget us, too." The sun was high in the sky, and the sea below was calm when Peter pulled alongside the children. "There it is," he said, "Neverland." Wendy, John, and Michael looked into the distance. "Where?" they shouted. They craned their necks for a better look, and suddenly they saw it all at once. They knew in an instant that it was Neverland. "There's the lagoon," Wendy said, as she pointed to the island in the sea. "And there's your cave, Michael," John said with glee. "I see smoke from an Indian camp," Michael said. "It's just across the mysterious river." In the children's dreams, Neverland was make-believe. Now it was real. Peter was annoyed that the children already knew so much about Neverland. He wanted to be their leader. He sent Tinker Bell on ahead to scout the island. It was growing dark as the children and Peter swooped low over the island. Wendy, John, and Michael stayed close to him. Peter studied the island closely. "Would you like an adventure now?" he asked, "or would you rather have tea first?" "Tea," Wendy said quickly. Michael agreed, but John was more interested in adventure. "What kind of adventure?" he asked cautiously. "There's a pirate asleep in the plains just below us," Peter said. "If you like, we can go down and fight him." John looked for the pirate. "I don't see him," he said. "Well, I do," Peter answered sharply. "What if he wakes up?" John asked nervously. "You don't think I would attack him while he's sleeping?" Peter said indignantly. "I would wake him first." Now John was unsure if he wanted to attack or have tea first. "How many pirates are there?" he asked. "More than I can count," Peter replied. "Their leader is Captain Hook." John gulped aloud, and Michael began to cry. They already knew of Captain Hook's fierce reputation. "He's big," Peter said quickly, "but not as big as he was. I cut off a bit." "You did?" John asked, astonished. "His right hand," Peter replied proudly. "Now he has an iron hook for a hand that is quite like a claw." "A claw!" John gulped again. "But he can still fight," Peter said. "So you must promise that if we meet him in a fight, you must lead him to me." "I promise," John said, relieved. It grew darker. When Tinker Bell returned, the children could see one another in her glow and felt less afraid. Tink whirled around them like a moth around a candle, though she was the light. Peter didn't like Tink's lighting up everything just then. "Tink says the pirates spotted us," he said. "They saw her light and got out their cannon, Long Tom." "Then tell her to go away," the children cried. "No," Peter said. "She thinks we're lost and she's afraid." "Then tell her to turn off her light," Wendy begged. "Fairies can't turn off their lights," Peter said. "The lights only go off when they're asleep, and they can only sleep when they're tired." He glanced at the children. "If one of us had a pocket, we could carry her in it," he said. He thought for a moment. "I have it. John can carry her in his hat." Tink agreed to hide in the hat, though not if Wendy carried it. She jumped in, and John put it on his head. Immediately the children were surrounded by darkness. They flew on in silence, though many noises reached them from the island below. Suddenly the air was rocked by a powerful roar as the pirates fired Long Tom. There was no longer any doubt that the island was real. Peter was tossed high into the air and out of sight by a rush of wind. Wendy and Tinker Bell, who was still in John's hat, were blown in another direction. John and Michael floated alone in the darkness. "Are you shot?" John whispered to his brother. "I don't know," Michael whispered back. Luckily, nobody was hit by the cannonball. Tinker Bell popped out of John's hat to find herself alone with Wendy. This was a perfect time for her to get rid of Wendy, for Tink was very jealous of her. She flitted back and forth in front of Wendy, filling the air with the tinkling sound of her voice. Wendy couldn't understand her, of course, but thought it meant follow me. Wendy didn't know what to do. She called for John and Michael and Peter, but nobody answered. Since Wendy didn't know that Tink didn't like her, she trusted the tiny fairy and followed. She didn't know where she was flying, or to her own doom.